Carl Jung explains why you're destined to become your own worst enemy. What if I told you that the biggest threat to your future, your purpose, your peace of mind, is you? Not the version of you that you show to others, not the version that posts online or smiles politely in meetings. I'm talking about the version you hide, even from yourself, the one buried deep beneath the persona you've carefully crafted. Carl Jung, one of the most profound thinkers of the modern era, believed that we are all born with a shadow, a hidden mirror self made up of everything we deny, repress, or refuse to accept. And unless we confront it, we don't just risk sabotaging our lives, we guarantee it. Jung didn't just warn us about our darkness, he showed us that ignoring it is the most dangerous thing we can do. Because when we refuse to face the parts of ourselves that scare us, we don't destroy them, we empower them, and that's how good people slowly become their own worst enemy. Let's start with something deceptively simple. Who do you think you are? Most of us answer based on our conscious identity, our job, our beliefs, our relationships, our values. But Jung would challenge that immediately. He'd say, that's not who you are, that's your persona, the mask you wear to navigate the world. We all have one, and we need it to function. But the danger comes when we confuse the mask for the self, because behind that mask lies a vast, unacknowledged part of you, the shadow. It contains everything you've rejected: your anger, your fear, your envy, your guilt, your deepest impulses. And whether you like it or not, it's there. It doesn't vanish just because you pretend it isn't.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Now here's where it gets intense. The more you push the shadow away, the more power it gains. Jung said, what you resist not only persists, but grows in size. So every time you deny part of yourself, when you say, I'm not jealous, or I'm not manipulative, or I'm not afraid, that part doesn't disappear. It just goes underground. And from there it starts to control you in subtle, unconscious ways. It leaks out in passive-aggressive comments, self-sabotaging behavior, unexplained anxiety, broken relationships. You think you're in control, but you're not. The shadow is. This is why Jung insisted that self-awareness isn't just a luxury. It's a necessity. If you don't bring the shadow into the light, it will operate from the dark. And when that happens, you become your own enemy. Not because you're evil, but because you're blind. You're at war with yourself without realizing it. You create problems that seem to come from the outside, but they're really echoes of your inner conflict. The toxic boss, the failed dreams, the repeating patterns in relationships, they're often symptoms of an internal war you haven't acknowledged. Think about how many times we project. You meet someone and instantly dislike them. Why? Jung would say it's often because they reflect something you've denied in yourself. Their arrogance mirrors your own repressed pride. Their freedom triggers your hidden envy. Their boldness reminds you of the courage you buried long ago. And instead of recognizing it, you demonize them. That's projection, when we cast our shadow onto others because we can't bear to face it within. And it's one of the most common ways the shadow runs the show. But it doesn't stop there. The shadow isn't just about negative traits. It also contains repressed potential, qualities you buried because you were told they were too much, not realistic, or not you. Maybe you grew up believing you had to be quiet, so you hid your voice. Or you learned to be agreeable, so you suppressed your fire. Over time, that buried strength becomes part of the shadow, and if you never reclaim it, you live a smaller life than you were meant to. So your worst enemy isn't just the part of you that sabotages, it's also the part of you that never gets expressed. Jung believed that the path to wholeness is not in perfection, but in integration. You don't become strong by pretending you're all light. You become strong by facing your darkness and making peace with it. That's how you stop being run by unconscious forces. That's how you begin to act with clarity, intention, and power, not from reaction, but from realization. And that's not just philosophy, it's survival. Because unless you do this inner work, the shadow will find a way to surface, and when it does, it won't ask for permission. It'll come out in the form of addiction, rage, depression, or quiet despair. It'll wear your face, speak with your voice, and leave you wondering why everything keeps going wrong. The mirror of conflict, how others reveal the darkness you hide. We all have people that set us off, those who irritate us, challenge us, or make us feel small without doing anything obviously wrong. Sometimes it's a stranger's arrogance, a friend's neediness, or a co-worker's constant need to be right. On the surface, it seems like the problem is them, but Carl Jung invites us to look again. He says these emotional reactions aren't random, they're clues. Each person who triggers us is a mirror reflecting back something hidden within ourselves, something we've disowned, something we've refused to integrate. And that's the paradox. The people we dislike the most often expose the parts of ourselves we most need to face. This is the heart of Jung's concept of projection. We don't just project our fears or fantasies onto the world, we project our shadow. The parts of ourselves we've repressed don't vanish, they seek expression. And when we won't give them space internally, they show up externally. We see them in others, we judge them, we attack them. But we're really fighting ghosts of our own unconscious mind. It's like turning your back on a part of yourself only to find it wearing someone else's face. And until we realize this, we stay locked in a loop of blame and misunderstanding, not just with others, but with ourselves. Think about it. Have you ever met someone who instantly annoyed you, even though they hadn't really done anything? Jung would say, pause. Ask yourself, what exactly is it about them that bothers me? Is it their confidence, their selfishness, their emotional intensity? And then ask the harder question, where does that live in me? Not as a behavior you actively display, but as a possibility you've rejected. Maybe you were taught to be humble, so now you despise arrogance in others because it threatens the image of who you think you're supposed to be. Maybe you were told to stay calm and collected, so now people who are emotionally expressive make you uncomfortable, not because they're wrong, but because they remind you of what you're not allowed to be. This is where conflict becomes a gift, because every time someone triggers your emotion, they're offering you a map to your own shadow. They're revealing something you haven't accepted yet. And that's the work. To use those interactions not as chances to judge, but to investigate. To say, why does this affect me so much? What am I defending? What am I afraid of seeing in myself? That is radical self-inquiry. It's not easy, it's not fun, but it's how you stop being a puppet of your unconscious reactions. It's how you begin to reclaim your power. But it's not just negative traits we project, we also project our light. Jung called this the golden shadow, the strengths, talents, and beauty we deny in ourselves and instead admire in others. So when you idolize someone, when you say, "I could never be like them," you're often projecting your own buried potential. You've disowned your greatness just as much as your flaws, and both need to be brought back, because to become whole, you have to claim all of yourself, not just what fits the image you've built for the world. That's why Jung didn't see the shadow as evil, he saw it as human. It includes your rage, yes, but also your courage. It contains your jealousy, but also your ambition. It holds your selfishness, but also your sense of worth. The shadow is not your enemy. Denying it is. Because when we refuse to face our full self, we become fragmented, and fragmented people hurt themselves and others, often without meaning to. We lash out, withdraw, sabotage, or chase validation because we're trying to manage a war within. So what if the next time someone triggered you, you didn't react instinctively? What if you got curious instead? What if you saw that moment as a portal, not to judge them, but to understand yourself more deeply? What if every conflict was a mirror, every annoyance a signal, every emotional spike a flare from the unconscious saying, "Look here, there's something you need to see," because the truth is, the people who frustrate you the most might be the ones who are unknowingly trying to wake you up. The hero's descent, why true strength comes from facing your inner monster. There's a reason every great myth includes a descent into darkness. Whether it's the underworld, the cave, the belly of the beast, or the storm-ridden sea, the hero must always face the thing they fear most before they can rise. Carl Jung saw this not as fiction, but as a psychological truth. He believed that every individual must make that descent, not into some literal hell, but into their own unconscious, into the chaos, the pain, the unresolved wounds, and the parts of the psyche we would rather avoid. Because until we face our inner monster, we remain its victim. We walk around haunted by a fear we can't name, a rage we can't explain, a sadness we can't shake. And it's only by confronting these forces directly that we begin to reclaim our life from them. But here's the problem. We're conditioned to run from that descent. We're taught to stay positive, to keep it together, to focus on the light. We're told darkness is dangerous, that it will swallow us whole, and so we avoid the hard questions. We avoid solitude. We avoid silence. We keep the music playing and the notifications buzzing because we're terrified of what might emerge if we let the noise stop. But Jung would say, that's precisely the moment you need to watch for. That's the moment the real journey begins. Not when you're successful, not when you're admired, but when you're cracked open, when the mask falls, when life brings you to your knees and you have nothing left to protect. Because in that moment, something extraordinary becomes possible. You can either collapse or you can descend. You can choose to face the monster directly. You can ask yourself, what have I been running from all this time? What pain have I locked away? What belief have I swallowed without ever questioning it? And when you do, you begin to see that the monster isn't what you thought. It's not some foreign invader, it's you, disowned, distorted, and desperate to be seen. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole. And wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean becoming flawless or saintly. It means integrating all parts of yourself, even the ones you hate, especially those, because the parts you reject don't vanish. They fester. They turn into addictions, compulsions, depression, or toxic relationships. But when you acknowledge them, when you give them a voice, a space, a name, they begin to lose their grip. You stop being possessed by them, you start to understand them, and slowly they transform from demons into allies. Think about that. The very thing you've been avoiding might hold the key to your strength. Your rage might contain your power. Your grief might unlock your compassion. Your envy might point to your deepest longing. But none of that can happen if you stay on the surface. You have to go down. You have to enter the cave, not to destroy the monster, but to meet it, to say, I see you. I know you're part of me, and I'm no longer afraid. This descent isn't a one-time event. It's a cycle. Every time life challenges you, every heartbreak, every failure, every crisis, it's another calling to go deeper, to retrieve another piece of your soul. And every time you answer that call, you come back changed. Not cleaner, not shinier, but truer, more grounded, more real. That's the reward of the descent, not applause, but authenticity, not power over others, but sovereignty over yourself. So I want to ask you, what have you been refusing to face? What truth lives in your shadow, waiting to be reclaimed? And what might happen if you stopped running and instead turned toward it, courageously, even trembling? Because maybe being a hero isn't about slaying dragons. Maybe it's about realizing the dragon was you all along and loving it back into wholeness. Becoming the whole self, how integration sets you free. After all, the descent, the confrontation, the exposure of your hidden fears and unlived truths, what remains? What's left when you've stood face to face with your shadow and refused to turn away? According to Jung, you begin to approach something rare and powerful. Integration, not the absence of conflict, but the reconciliation of it. Not the erasure of your flaws, but the acceptance of them. You stop striving to be good in the eyes of the world, and begin the deeper work of becoming whole in the eyes of your soul. Integration is the point where light and dark are no longer enemies. It's where you realize that your anger, your fear, your selfishness, these are not stains on your character, but messengers. They arise to signal imbalance, to ask you to listen, to reorient you toward your truth. When you push them away, they distort. But when you welcome them in, when you examine what they're trying to tell you, they soften, they become guides. This is the real freedom Jung spoke of, not freedom from pain, but freedom from fragmentation. You're no longer a divided self, constantly at war with your own instincts, impulses, and contradictions. You begin to respond to life instead of react. You stop needing the world to validate you, because you've already made peace with the parts of yourself you used to hide. And in that peace, something else emerges. Authenticity, the ability to move through life as a full human being, not a curated persona. But here's the truth. Integration doesn't mean you're finished. It doesn't mean you're healed forever or immune to inner conflict. Life keeps evolving, and so do you. Jung never promised a final destination. He offered a path, a way of seeing yourself that is honest, courageous, and compassionate, a way of living that is rooted not in perfection, but in presence. You become someone who can hold complexity, who can carry joy and sorrow in the same breath, who can be fierce and gentle, flawed and worthy, all at once.